Good afternoon, everyone. I would welcome you to our next panel. We'll be having with us Klaas Akkerman from Greener Power Solutions, which is, well, I can't say startup anymore. I think you're a scale-up by now. From a couple of clever TU Delft guys who started a company to change the world and started with the festival industry. But I'll leave it to him to properly tell their story because you know the latest developments and how you might have pivoted, for example, also during COVID-19. So without further ado, I give you Klaas Akkerman.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thomas, thanks for the invite and the short introduction. I will give you a short presentation on what we do with the company I founded 2 years ago with two of my dear friends, which is called Greener Power Solutions. The presentation is called a fossil-free off-grid energy production, and that's what we are going to talk about. For our company, the mission is to reduce the CO2 footprint of energy markets using mobile batteries and smart energy planning software. This is something we've been doing now for 2 years, and I think it's fair to say that we currently in the Netherlands are offering the best and cleanest energy solutions in off-grid and temporary energy situations. We currently have 9 people employed. We have 13 batteries and over 30 more battery systems coming. In the past 2 years, we saved over 250,000 liters of fuel and up to 1 million kilos of CO2 emissions, which would have been a lot, like a lot more if Corona didn't hit so hard on the economy this year. Though we are recovering swiftly and we're really becoming a respected and innovative party in the energy production field. So to give you a small insight of what I mean with the battery systems, so what we have are Alphen built mobile battery systems which have 318 kVA of power and 330 kilowatt hour of storage capacity. We use lithium-ion NMC BMW technology, and it's all been squeezed really neatly in a 10 feet reefer container with active air conditioning, weighs about 8 tons, can really easily be picked up, transported, deployed, starts in a minute. You just connect whatever you want to connect to it and you have power as you like. And it's not only off-grid power that we can deliver, but we can do so much more with batteries, and that's really where the vision of Greener is going to take off. So we have basically we have 4 pillars. So we have the batteries, we have the software, we have the intelligence and the support. The batteries are really the working horse of the company, so they can provide peak shaving, off-grid power, seasonal capacity, uninterrupted power supply, mobile EV charging. There's all these typical solutions that you can use a battery for, but then the battery itself is only a machine that will be empty if you used it for too long. So you have to be really smart about the planning of your charging and discharging. And since people want to be educated on the amount of energy that they use, we have really started to develop not only a controller that will make sure that batteries can start in time on either renewables, grid connections, or diesel generators, or any other source of kilowatt hours. We have also made a whole dashboarding service complete with 8 APIs and logging and monitoring of the systems, because the nice thing about the battery is it's already connected to the internet. So when you're using it, people can already see while using it how much energy they're actually using. So so then we're running, and then the next part is the planning and the forecasting, and that's really where the efficiency comes in. We can predict energy consumption on festivals or construction sites, and based on that knowledge, we can plan more efficient energy setups, and also again change the charge and discharge times and breaks for the batteries. And then last, and that's what Greener makes a really one-of-a-kind company. So we combine the tech stuff, so the batteries, with the software, and then we have our own team of people that can also come to site, explain how stuff is working, troubleshoot, can commission. And so we can go do the full package from energy planning up till the reporting of what you've been using and every step in the middle. Well, the reason why is really 2 years ago, when we founded the company, we found that there is actually not a real alternative for diesel generators. We opted to use batteries instead of diesel to provide the power, but the battery is just a power, an energy buffer, and not so much a source. So that's why we implemented the smart power. But by using these batteries in smart grid solutions, we can offer this solution for all these temporary power situations that are indicated on the slide. So if either it's you need an increased grid connection, you need power on your event, airport, you can think of grid balancing, EV charging, the emergency power, auxiliary power, you name it. We can use the battery as part of an energy plant and make it smarter and way more efficient than it otherwise would have been running. So to show you a little where we work and what steps we are making is in the first year we had one battery and we did about 15 events and festivals and some EV charging. 2019 was really the year that we were starting to look for other markets. So we did some pilots in construction and we did some pilots in grid boosting projects. The nice thing about this project is that they last a bit longer, and so it's the impact you make on your fuel savings and CO2 reductions become far greater. And 2020 was really going to be the year that we were focusing on both, so the festivals and the other markets, but with a strong focus on the festivals in the first part of the year. But that didn't really turn out. But currently we're mainly doing all these projects where we are increasing grid connections for campsites, for construction sites, for supermarkets, restaurants that need more power from the grid, which they currently can get from their DSO. And we use the batteries to temporarily solve this, which was otherwise done with a diesel generator. And that's the nice thing, because these locations are always in city centers, campsites, and other locations where you absolutely don't want the pollution of diesel generators. So despite Corona, we are really making a pivot and are looking into a brighter future where we are entering multiple markets, which can all be serviced with the same solution that we have, either being at the hardware component, the battery, or the software component, or both at the same time. And then for the next years, we're looking into these markets like offshore, humanitarian, grid quality, and fully remote energy solutions, either in Europe or Africa or the United States. As I discussed already a little in my previous slides, it's for Green. It's not about the battery. The battery is a machine that makes it possible to do this awesome stuff. But you really have to understand your energy needs, and that's therefore we built our own energy planning dashboard in which we can collect the predicted energy loads, and based on that we can start planning more efficient power production by using the batteries in combination with small grid connections, or if we need smaller generators which only run about 10% of the time that they would have normally done. And then this controller that we've built makes it possible to combine all these different energy assets into one energy system, which is then managed and monitored by Greener. And so the client can always see what you are using in amount of energy, which machines are running, maybe where you can improve your energy efficiency, and that's communicated in multiple channels. So we have either the chatbot, so that's just on your phone where you can ask the energy management system what is currently running, so how full are the batteries, how many energy am I using, or you can log in onto the dashboard where you can really do diagnostics and see how much power you used in a specific period of time during the day. And then eventually all clients always receive an after-sales report that gives them insight in their total energy consumption and really gives them the tools to see for the future projects where improvements can be made. And that's super important, because it's not only about being more efficient, but all the energy you don't actually need. That's the most efficient way of using energy, is not by using it at all. And we as a company really focus on this innovation and the working together with other professional parties that can push this this innovation faster and faster. So that's why we work with a company like Alfen to deliver us the batteries, since they have the most experience with building battery systems. Then we have operational parties that help us, and we help them with providing either battery solutions for their energy projects, or we can use their stuff to use the batteries in our projects. But that saves the hassle of reinventing the whole operational side of the company. Same for the partnerships we have with innovative energy companies and related companies that are looking for battery solutions, or think that the battery eventually can become part of their energy setup, either being it windmills, solar panels, or airborne wind power. And so we really believe that the success of the energy transition is based on the way parties are willing to collaborate on a professional and personal level, in order to make sure that we focus on the possibilities and not so much on the bureaucracy that goes around working as different companies. So last, where I'm going to end is really where we think we're going. So the market will have an increased need for buffering of the buffering of energy for the changing power demand and production profiles, either by like electric cars, electric cookers, but also the implementation of renewables on the grid. Shifting focus towards local energy management. So currently everything is operated on a national grid, but we think it will really go down to building level, street level, residential areas, which during the day already become energy neutral, not over the full year. Greener itself will continue developing its service so that it can offer turnkey grid projects, turnkey off-grid energy projects, where you only pay per kilowatt hour for 100% fossil-free energy, which is currently unique in the market. And for that, we will further develop our energy prediction tools based on the data and the AI. So this is where I'm going to leave it for now. I hope you enjoyed this small presentation. I'm really curious to see if there are any questions from Thomas or the audience.
Yes, thank you for that presentation, Klaas. I'm deeply impressed, because I know you from when it was a wild idea, and then from the first battery to I think a dozen or so now, and the 30 planned or on order. You mentioned a couple of markets you want to expand to, like or I saw in your slides, Belgium, Switzerland, if I'm correct, France, and I missed a couple of others in for what was at least originally planned for 2020. And you mentioned USA and Africa for 2021. What would be your dream client or dream project that you would want to do, say in 2020 or 2021, where it's like, okay, then we've really changed the world, or this is a company or a project I'm really passionate about, where I want to help save a lot of fossil fuels?
Yeah, I think it's two answers. Me myself, I'm the operational guy in the company, so I'm really close to the work in the field. So that you will often get a pragmatic answer from me. For the company, is really being able to deliver the energy based on the kilowatt hour price. So the client never ever has to bother again with diesel generators, with cables or whatever. It's just, if you hire Greener will make sure that you have all the energy that you need, and you only pay for what you have used, which is exactly the way you do it at home. But in the off-grid market, that's really hard at the moment. I think for now, what's really interesting for us is really getting up to speed with the grid operators, in the Netherlands, but in the whole western part of Europe, people are the demand for bigger grid connections to support the higher need for peak power for either car charging or the electric cookers is really something that's currently just being fixed by just a patchwork of thicker cables and really looked into as micro projects. Whereas if you would use the batteries as energy buffers in certain locations, then you can do with a lot less infrastructure. You buy a lot of time to find a final solution, and maybe in a year or 5 years. But the battery will just make sure that in the meantime, everything can continue without unnecessarily increasing the amount of copper in the streets, increasing the rated power of substations and stuff, which is really expensive, inefficient, and costs a lot of manpower that can be used in a way more practical way. So that's like the really practical one. So like the DSOs, we really have to start being clever about how batteries can be used to solve this pain which is currently being felt. And on the other hand, shifting to this market where people only pay for what they use.
And perhaps you can briefly elaborate what DSOs are for people who are not familiar with the energy and the power industry.
The DSOs are typically the parties that make sure that the electrical energy from the power plant is being transported to your house. And there's differs slightly from country to country, but basically we really want to get in touch with the guys who are responsible for the power distribution towards your house or office.
And can you mention a couple of which you currently work with? Because that I think will also help resonate with people, like, okay, what kind of companies are these? So they might also think of how they can help you. For example, I'm assuming you'll probably be working with a couple of Dutch ones, but you mentioned that you want to expand to Belgium, France, Germany, or that you're in that process. So you can give a couple of names, and also perhaps the kind of departments or the kind of people they need to connect you to, so they know better how to help you out.
Yeah, so in the Netherlands, we have a lot of talks with Leander. You have Stedin and Enexis and some smaller ones. We've talked to most of these companies, but it's also a bit of a legislation issue, because these companies are obliged to give a solution to if someone needs a bigger grid connection, and the solution is always a thicker cable, but cannot be a battery at the moment, simply because they don't own the batteries, and they are not allowed to make the arrangements that they can rent out the battery as a temporary solution, because often bigger grid connections are installed just by the lack of proper information on the total amount of energy that you're going to use. So that then a grid connection might not even be necessary, or it's only for temporary. Like on campsites, they need massive grid connections in the summer to accommodate all the glamping, which is currently really hot in the Netherlands because we are staying in our own country.
But I think this goes for several countries and places around the world right now.
Yeah. And then you can just bring in the battery, use it for 4 months, and then remove it without having the need to reinstall substations, open the street, put thicker cables in, and all the inconvenience that comes from that.
And that is also a very time-consuming, expensive process. And I think for some big grid connections, it can actually take a couple of years before it's solved. Yep. So I think, especially also with the energy transition and transitioning to a more sustainable world, I think it's very important that we properly think, and that great companies, but also hotels, restaurants, hospitals, which I think you mentioned, that might have a sudden surge or a temporary surge in power, that not the solution is call your great company and let's see if you have an extra thicker grid cable in 2 or 3 years from now, but that you localize it, and for example that you supply that to, well, festivals is of course a sexy example, but to a marketplace. I saw one being built up now, which I think is still run by diesel generators, and you can do it there next week and have it in a different place the other time. And for example, you mentioned the US. What would be a company or a project? I mean, I can imagine Burning Man being a fun project, but for something with a lot of impact where you could really make a difference on reducing the carbon footprint, what are the first companies or organizations or universities or places where you think like that's where we want to be and should be?
Yeah, well, Burning Man is of course on the list of locations where we want to go. We know that in California, in New York State, there's a lot of development going on in terms of energy production, but also in the Midwest, you have still a lot of people living there. You have small communities that need power, and especially over there, and that's why the US is also in our market development under the remote fully off-grid power solutions. Is if you have a remote a village or something, they're mostly run by diesel generators, also on islands, and because there's simply no grid connection. And if we can provide a stable solution with a battery as a buffer, and then airborne wind power, solar panels, and or windmills, you can always generate enough kilowatt hours, and then the battery will take care of the delivery of the right amount of energy to the power users at that moment. So that's a completely new way of looking into that off-grid power production, and that's where we're focusing on for those countries.
That is actually quite an interesting insight, because I would never expect, and I think most people wouldn't, that there are still places in the Midwest of the US where you don't have actual grid connection, and that you're dependent on diesel generators, and that this could be a solution for this. I mean, that's, well, you could imagine different places in the world where you would expect that, but that even in the US, this is still an issue. And perhaps wrapping up, what would be your recommendations for policymakers? Because you mentioned that there is a couple of regulatory issues, not just for you, but I think for the broader transition to a more sustainable world. We have discussions or preliminary plans about the Green New Deal already under review prior to COVID, and now being accelerated or discussed as part of the Green Recovery Plan, as they call it, with a big EU summit scheduled for this weekend. What would be your advice or call out to Ursula von der Leyen, Frans Timmermans, Dirk Samson, who I'm sure are all watching or might get somebody forward this to them, but also to Dutch or EU or US policymakers? What would be your top 3 tips, if you will?
Well, one was already in the presentation, to see that how can DSOs use the market in a different way. At least in the Netherlands, I'm not so sure about the situation in other countries, but being able to incorporate these battery solutions is really going to benefit. I'm technically schooled, so I really believe in the possibilities that come with the whole energy transition. You see popping up ideas everywhere, which can be really good or really bad, but it's also a matter of keeping faith that this is a process. It's not that we're going to switch from fossil to renewable on a certain date, and also the steps that we as Green are currently taking are just I think baby steps, but really important baby steps in the whole energy transition. We get a lot of people who complain that batteries are expensive. They also, there's CO2 emission and all sorts of emissions when batteries are being built, and we're investigating that to give them a proper answer on those questions. But it's really about the process, and I think what would be great is if we just can keep incorporating the technical innovation in the current day life, and making sure that regulations for instance, fire safety of the use of battery systems is really not regulated at the moment in the Netherlands. But it's also a big liability for a company of ours. We invest heavily in these battery systems, and if one day these battery systems become known as being too dangerous to operate, whilst we took all the proper technical measures to make sure that these machines are as safe as they can be, that's going to be really difficult for the whole process, because storage is going to be, I think, the pivotal point in the whole situation. I mean, you can have enough production, you can have enough off-takers of energy, but the timing of when people can produce and use energy, that's something which is going to be super hard to regulate, and that's where storage really needs to have to get as much as room to be developed and tested as needed, I think.
And what would be your advice to other sustainable startups, startup hubs around the world? For example, something which Prince Constantine talked about yesterday in this keynote at the global main stage. What would be your advice to those sustainable startups, the startup hubs, and startup envoys like Prince Constantine?
We made sure that we already found the market before we could actually really deliver the product, and be clear and honest about the goals that you have for the product with your first customers, and make sure that you keep those first customers aligned, because they will have the most important opinion on your product and your service. You can really use them as your friends in developing the product further. Believe in the product, but make sure that you find market, because without market, it's going to be really hard to scale or to show that you're actually proving a point.
I think perhaps a final question. What would be your advice to young people wanting to get into studying STEM subjects, and/or starting a tech or a sustainable startup?
That's a good one. I think you have to be very conscious about your surroundings, understand what's happening, understand what people want to change, and see how you can make that happen. I think you can only sell it if there's market. That's what I already said as answer to your previous question. Stick to your idea, believe in it, and don't take no for an answer. I would say it's really about your timing is key. If an idea doesn't work, doesn't mean that it's bad. It can also be that you were 2 years early, maybe. But really be conscious about your surroundings and see what's happening and where you can step in.
Maybe to elaborate a bit more on that. What I meant was before you get to the stage that you start your startup, we're gonna need, and we already need, a lot of technical and clever technical guys and girls, software engineers, people who help bring solar panels to another higher level. That, for example, you now have solar panels that last 50 years instead of the previous 25, 30 years with higher energy yield. But we're going to need a lot of clever people to develop that further, to make sure it's implemented. We need people on the policy side. You saw a lot of climate youth last year, like in the Netherlands, 15,000 young people marching in the streets, which is a little difficult now due to COVID. And you've seen that all around the world with Fridays for Future led by Greta Thunberg. What would you do to have those young people get interested in STEM subjects, tech, and that they, once they go to university or secondary education, that they have those skills and that they're interested in it, because they care about the climate, but how do we get them interested in learning these skills?
Yeah, that's a good one. I've been fascinated with technique since I was a little guy. So for me, going to a technical school was a really logical thing to do. And then it was during my studies that I came in touch with what I'm doing right now. Though I worked for 3 years after my studies, and then we decided to fund a company. I'm still going to say, like, see what other people are doing and saying, and try to understand them, and really talk to other people. And I mean, you're not going to change the world on yourself, and also not overnight. So it's also like, if you're marching for climate, then it's a process. It's a really, really, really long process. It's never going to be fast enough in anyone's opinion. But yeah, you really have to keep faith in the process, and look for these nice developments that are possible. Like for instance, now the rise of lithium-ion batteries, and how well they're performing compared to what was expected. I really think I'm really going to stick with talk to people, and see what is happening in your surroundings.
And then perhaps what was a seasoned entrepreneur that helped you propel along? Because a lot of people think you start a startup, but there's often a lot of how you say hidden experts, or people that say, like, that are part of the first couple of people that believe in your product, or believe in your solution, or believe in you as a person, and might have 20 or 30 years of industry experience, and say, like, hey, those guys at Greener, those guys and girls at Greener, I should say, are doing very clever stuff. Hey, I have a big network. Let me help them along. What kind of people did you bump into? How did they find you? And how would you encourage other people to do the same?
Well, we did join an accelerator program, which is based on smart energy. That helped a lot. We worked with other startups, mainly from Europe, and some startups from outside Europe. That accelerator really gave us a lot of opportunity to talk to people who are interesting. Also, our first investors were not really into energy as such, but they could really see that there's a lot of to be changed in the current way we produce and use energy, and that's why I think they believe that their money was well spent by giving it to us, and we as a company of 3 young guys financing our first battery, and just going to people, asking them if they wanted to rent it, and see what they like, what they didn't like, and then start building the whole software part of the company around it.
And for example, if you can name 1 or 3 entrepreneurs, be it male or female, anywhere in the world, who would you like to have a cup of coffee with, or dinner, and have an hour to pick their brain and see if they can help you further along?
Well, we are still changing. Duncan Stutterheim from ID&T Festivals was our beachhead market, and he has always really been into innovation. We got to talk to some of his colleagues, which is really interesting. I think maybe someone from the parliament in The Hague, being as a Klaas Dijkhoff, to also understand how politics on a national level can be understood for us as a small company that wants to make an impact on a European or global scale, to understand what keys are that are important to look for if you are talking to people about this innovation. I'm not the best in the world with names. I mean, Elon Musk must be pretty interesting to talk to, Jeff Bezos. So if that's
Elon, if you're listening, give the guys and give Klaas at Greener a call. And you mentioned Klaas Dijkhoff, but in general with MPs, do you have the sense that they understand your, not just your product, but sustainable innovations? And is it clear for you as a startup or scale-up entrepreneur, what, for example, what kind of MP you need to talk to, because they all have different terrains? Is it clear to you, should I talk to somebody who has economics and climate change in their portfolio, or somebody who is in charge of finance or fiscal stimulus, or infrastructure and roads, etc.? Because for me, already it would be difficult to say like, okay, you need to talk to this MP, but maybe I'm wrong. But what would be
well, I think in the Netherlands the whole startup system is pretty well backed by the government, not by, at least I don't know the specific people who make these subsidies available and organize all these wonderful events where startups can pitch and exchange knowledge. So for me as a person, that's never really been a really big quest to find the right and proper people or situations where you can get more information or take the next step. For us, it's really we're a B2B company, so it's really up to us to convince the other Bs that they need us instead of a diesel generator. And on a political level, we are also being backed. I mean, municipality of Amsterdam is slowly but surely banning diesel generators from their city center. A lot of other cities in the Netherlands are doing the same. I mean, if you cannot use a diesel generator, then you are going to use a grid connection, which is probably not on time because they have to put more copper in the street. So a battery is then a super logical solution, and that's where we are. So yeah. Also, what I already said, just talk to a lot of people and see what they can do for you, or if they know people that can help you make that next step. And that can either be someone who is looking into a field of work that's not even closely related to what you're doing, because like it's like you're talking to entrepreneurs, you're talking to people who are also looking around them to see what is happening and see where they can make an impact, and that's the most important thing, I think.
And I think final question, you mentioned that it's difficult for some of the grid operators or the DSOs, as you call them, to work with you because of regulation. So what would be, for example, if you talk to Klaas Dijkhoff or Jesse Klaver or any other policymaker, or Hugo de Jonge, who recently made statements that he wants to put climate first. Yeah. So Hugo de Jonge, Klaas Dijkhoff, Jesse Klaver, they all get on the phone. They say, guys, tell us, what should we change in regulation? What would be your number one or top three of policy suggestions?
I think I touched on both. I think on the one hand, the DSOs are semi-private companies, so they have to follow regulations that currently do prevent us from presenting us our solution to them, that they can use it. Yeah, and the regulations on the use of battery systems as a whole is for our company in particular really important. And I once thought maybe it is interesting to investigate if it's possible to put a fair market value on the price of 1 kilowatt hour, because currently everybody is making calculations how solar power is cheaper than battery power compared to conventional diesel or nuclear. But in the whole chain, there's always this massive amount of subsidies, hidden subsidies, fees and other kind of stuff. I think if we really want to create a level playing field and give this electrification a chance in the whole energy transition, I really think that we have to do a really clear analysis of what the actual price of a kilowatt hour, or the amount of joule per second is what it's worth in order to be able to on a fair basis present subsidies and help from a government level.
Yeah, I think that would be a good suggestion, and perhaps also to make people aware how much an average household uses. That's perhaps not your use case, but is a nice insight into how much kilowatt hours are consumed, and also by electrical devices like your washing machine, your TV, etc. Also, if they're running on standby. Actually, there's a couple of months ago, or maybe a year ago, Professor Andy van den Dobbelsteen from the TU Delft made a very nice movie called Energy Slaves, and it's depicted in the amount of rowers you need to power a home. And let's just say, as a former rower, it hits home pretty hard, because let's just say I can't do it alone, and even if I have a couple of classes with me and a couple of other strong TU Delft guys and girls, you need quite a few to run a shower for 10 minutes, etc. So I would really encourage everyone to also look up that video.
Yeah.
It's on Vimeo, and I think also on YouTube. And to just give you a sense how much energy we're using and how much energy we're wasting, because as I think you mentioned earlier, every kilowatt hour you don't use is also one you don't have to generate, which means you can power your house or your festival a lot longer with the same amount of energy than if you're wasting and just throwing it out a window.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the quickest win.
Okay. On that note, I would like to thank you for your time, and I would encourage everyone, if they have questions or suggestions, or if you're Elon Musk or Klaas Dijk or Jesse Klaver, and you want to get in touch with Klaas and his colleagues, that you go to greener.nl, if I'm correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think your email address is quite simple. It's just your first name, Klaas@greener.nl. And if there's policymakers listening, that they perhaps invite you over for a cup of coffee sometime to talk how we both build on the beautiful ecosystem we already have on startups. But what I also hear is that it's often fragmentized on a regional level, so that we make that more of a Dutch coherence, but also on the European level and the global scale that is more interconnected. Which
absolutely. Happy
to makes easier. Sorry, yeah.
No, I'm happy to share.
Okay, so well, Elon, Klaas, you know what to do. Give these guys a call. Again, thank you very much for taking a bit of your time on what I'm sure was a busy workday, and just in time for Friday afternoon drinks.
Yeah, absolutely. Planning is perfect.
I would invite everyone who's interested to also check out our program on the Campus Party website. So, and you can find there both Dutch talks, but you can also find some of our keynote speakers, some of which you might have heard about: Al Gore, some of the founders of the internet, Tim Berners-Lee, and Prince Constantine was as mentioned in the panel yesterday. And there's a couple of dozen more keynotes that you don't want to miss. So do check that out. And on that note, again, thank you for your time, and hope to catch you at a next offline version of Campus Party, hopefully when we're able to do that again in COVID-free times.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.